Hey people, so the first thing to note about this video is that I need to emphasize it's being based on sort of spontaneous um, decision to make the video. I haven't really planned this. Some of my videos, I have a real think about exactly what I'm going to say and then I say it. With this, it's more spontaneous. I had been thinking about the subject though for some time, but I'm making the video now. Basically, a while back I was watching the film Final Destination 4 with a friend, and at the start of that film, if you've seen the film, it opens with a big pile up at a drag show, race, whatever. Anyway, that's not really important. There's a scene at the very start where this cowboy basically comes in. He's got a big wide hat, and he's sitting in the front row, and the two girls behind, who are two of the main characters in the film, are sort of they get a little bit irritated because they can't see the racing because of this big hat. Now the guy then sort of overhears them complaining, so he turns around and says, "Sorry, ma'am, can you see?" And they're sort of like, actually feeling a little bit embarrassed maybe that he's heard them, and they say, "Actually, no, we can't." So he apologizes and moves down a row, and then one of the girls says, um, "Incredible," and I thought Chivalry was dead, sort of indicating that obviously the cowboy's a decent guy. He's demonstrating a chivalrous act by sort of moving out of respect for the fact she can't see. And then she follows up by, "I've got my own cowboy here." The film is not important. That's really not the point. But that got me thinking about the general subject of chivalry. Um, there's a lot of angles to take with this. I think the most important thing, first of all, is to establish what exactly we mean by chivalry. Um, in the old medieval context, it didn't just mean sort of men's attitude towards women. It meant wider issues like knightly conduct to one another, i.e., respect for one's enemies, respect for the king, respect for God. There was a lot of it was a very wide-ranging sort of concept. Um, and it's a bit of a myth that it prevailed throughout the Middle Ages. There were up and down periods. It's often said, for example, that Agincourt, there was no chivalry. There was no quarter given. So chivalry had up and down periods even then. But I think it's fair to say when we talk about chivalry today, definitely over the last 100 years, it's definitely been in the context of how men treat women. Um, and it's something that a lot of people tend to find is quite outdated, and there's different sort of schools of thought. Feminists reject it because they see it as patronizing and sexist, not because it's men going out of their way to do things for women, but because they regard it as patronizing. That's basically the feminist line on chivalry. A lot of men reject chivalry because they don't see what they're getting from it, and they see it as double standards and so on. Um, and I think it's fair to say it's got somewhat negative connotation today. And from my perspective, I find that a little bit sad because I think chivalry is not a bad thing fundamentally. Um, like I say, feminists reject it because they see it as patronizing. I don't agree with that. And a lot of men reject it because they don't see what they're getting from it. And they feel they're being obliged to do it and they're not seeing anything in return. I also reject that. Let me try and explain what I mean by this. Um, by the way, I came across a video by a guy called Lana Wama. Um, and I agree pretty much with everything he had to say. He made some very good points. The title of his video, I believe, is I'll try and put a link to that. "Chivalry is not dead, but being a lady might be." Vlog. Um, Basically, he makes some very good points in that video about how actually, for those of us who do believe in the concept of chivalry, those guys who do, we find it quite perplexing and frustrating when we hear this line from women, chivalry's dead, because actually it really isn't. Um, I do think there's some truth in the fact that for a long time a lot of women took it for granted. Um, and at some points, maybe over the last 30 years or so, men have pretty much given up, or they've become genuinely lost as to what women want. Because you do get a situation nowadays that a lot of men find themselves in, whereby if you perform a chivalrous act, there's a strong chance it's not going to be acknowledged, in which case you feel a bit stupid, or there might actually be open hostility. Um, whereby there could be a situation, for example, you hold the door open for a woman, she won't thank you. Lana Wama makes lots of examples in his personal experience. No, I haven't quite had examples like the ones he quoted, but I fully believe his experience. And I do think it's fair to say that a lot of women have taken it for granted. So, to those women who complain that chivalry is dead, I would ask them, really give an honest analysis of your own response to chivalry. At times in your life when there were chivalrous acts from men, and I'm sure there will have been, how did you respond to that? Did you respond with gratitude, or did you take it for granted? If you took it for granted, then you really cannot blame men for abandoning chivalry, because, the whole thing about chivalry, from my perspective, um, it's kind of got this reputation now that if a man shows chivalry, it's only because he wants sex at the end of it. That may be true of some men, but believe it or not, there are guys out there who perform acts of chivalry because they respect women, and that is their way of respecting women. Um, and I tend to see myself in that sort of category. I don't think I'm going to fit everything I want to in this video, but I'll try and fit what I can in. First thing, I'd like to address the sort of feminist perspective that it's patronizing. The thing about chivalry, guys know full well that a woman can open the door herself. They know she can, in many circumstances, handle a lot of things herself, and that's all very well. But there is chivalry and there is being overbearing, and it isn't the same thing. Now, if a guy is overbearing and he doesn't give the woman any space, that's where there's legitimate criticism. But if a man is sort of, I'll give an example. If a woman clearly has a lot of bags, she's been shopping and she's struggling with those bags, the man offers to help. Say, for example, she's a flatmate or something and he offers to help carry those bags up the stairs. That's a small act of chivalry. Now, is it really patronizing the offer to help? Or is that simply the act of a decent human being? I would volunteer that it's the latter. Now, you could argue that a man would also volunteer to help another man who is struggling with bags, but the situation tends to arise more in a man-woman dynamic. And if I'm being completely honest, I will show there are certain things I will do for everyone, and then certain things I will only do for women. Now, when I'm in a shopping centre and I open the sort of shopping doors, I'll instinctively hold it open for the person behind me, regardless of whether it's a man or a woman. And I have to say, um, most men say thank you. Some women do, not every woman does. That's interesting. Um, what other chivalrous acts do I sort of pursue? Uh, if it's a cold evening and I'm with a group of friends, and let's say for the sake of argument, I have been in this situation, so I'm not just bringing these out of thin air. Let's say the female friends or female acquaintances are clearly quite cold. It's a cold, blowy evening, and I have a jacket on. I will offer my jacket to one of those women. If a guy there is cold, I won't offer the jacket to him. Now, is that hypocrisy on my part. Maybe it is, but that to me is chivalry. And I have to say, when I was in that situation, the women involved were grateful. Um, Chivalry is not dead, ladies. There is a lot of chivalry out there. But where men don't show chivalry, it's likely because they aren't sure of the response. Um, and if you have taken it for granted, you really can't blame them for abandoning it. Um, you know, the and as for guys, this is the second message I want to send out to those guys who are saying, "Oh, it's a waste of time." Why should we be subservient to women? They see it as a subservient act. What I would argue is, in cases where women demonstrate gratitude, then that is the balance. I mean, if I perform a chivalrous act and the woman is grateful, to me, her gratitude, a nice smile and a thank you is enough. That is that makes me feel very good. Um, I do think there's a fear on the part of women that if guys are being nice, then they only want sex, and that may well be true of some guys. But the fact also remains that there are other guys out there who genuinely see you as a friend or see you as a woman. And what I mean by that is, because I want to be careful how I word this, um, let's face facts. Men and women are different. Now, I quite often will volunteer to accompany a girl to a bus station, um, or at least part of the way home at night time. And I've tried to judge that situation. I only do it with women I know now because it's backfired with acquaintances who have misunderstood that as, me wanting sex. And perhaps that's naivety on my part. And perhaps some women watching this will think, whoa. But my rationale is, what if I'm the last guy to see her? Something happens. And I read about that in the newspaper. Because you do get scumbags out there. My mother was attacked late at night by a mugger. Luckily, there was no serious damage. But from my perspective, it's to do with genuine concern for her safety. And I don't care what anyone says, the average woman is not as physically strong as the average man. No amount of self defense can defend a woman from um, a well built rapist. It's and I accept that these situations are relatively rare, and it is important that we don't scaremonger. But my point is, chivalry more often than not, well, actually, true chivalry is always based on good intentions. In situations where a guy is being very nice and he only wants sex, that isn't true chivalry. Um, True chivalry is when a man shows protective instinct towards a woman or helpful instinct towards a woman in a way he wouldn't necessarily show towards a man. Um, and to women out there, that isn't because he sees you as weak or subservient. It's his way of showing he respects you as a woman. And to guys out there, it isn't subservient. Um, because you're not showing yourself to be some sort of slave, you're showing yourself to be a good guy. And I'd like to make a point, demonstrating chivalry doesn't mean that you are sort of a pushover for women. You can still dislike certain women. You can still disagree with women. And I've had lots of arguments in my life, and some of them have been with women. There's women I don't like. And there's women I won't go out of my way to show chivalry to on the grounds that I know full well I'm not going to get any sort of gratitude from that. But I do feel that chivalry, and another important point, chivalry is a lot older than feminism. So those saying it's a byproduct of feminism don't know what they're talking about. Um, in conclusion, I think we need to really consider that chivalry, in the right circumstances, is something that can be quite pleasant. And in the right circumstances, both parties really do get something from it. I know that from personal experience. It's being vilified and it shouldn't be. I'll go into another video.